Good morning, folks. My name is Ronan. This is the Little Seal English podcast, and this episode focuses on a topic that some people may find too much or sensitive. It focuses a little bit about death. In this podcast, I'm going to talk about phrases for being surprised. I'm going to talk about words associated with death and what do you say to a person when someone dies. So just a heads up, if you're not interested in learning about some of those heavier topics, this podcast might not be for you. Essentially, I found a news story, I found it interesting, I turned it into a podcast. I hope you enjoy it, and you will absolutely will learn English here that you will not learn in a textbook. So here we go. Good morning, my friends. So, it's Friday morning, 7:27 a.m., and I was just checking the news and I found a story that made me go, what the hell? I found a story that made me say, what the fuck? I found a story that made me say, what the actual fuck? There are three good phrases for when you're surprised. What the hell? Obviously you can say that wherever you are. What the fuck? Yeah, you can say it around your friends. What the actual fuck? That's like what the fuck times two. That's when you're really, really, really surprised. So if you can't understand something, if you see something that is completely bewildering to you, you can say all of those three phrases. What the hell? What the fuck? What the actual fuck? So this news story that I just came across made me say, what the actual fuck? And the headline in the story was, 3 mummified bodies found in Colorado. Mummified bodies. Think about mummies. M-U-M-M-Y. You know the things in Egypt? You often see them at Halloween, for example. People dress up as them, and that's a mummified body. So let me just read a little bit of the story that made me go, what the hell? That made me go, what the fuck, or what the actual fuck? On Wednesday morning, news broke that 3 heavily decomposed bodies were found at a remote campground near Gunnison in recent days. A hiker found a first body near Gold Creek Campground on July 9th, with law enforcement finding 2 more upon their investigation of the scene the following morning. Gunnison County Under Sheriff Josh Ash described the campsite where the bodies were found as particularly developed, expressing his suspicion that the campsite could have been used for long-term off-grid living. Long-term off-grid living. Off-grid is when you do not live near people, you do not live connected to the main electricity sources, you do not have piped water, for example. Everything you have is done by yourself. You don't get help by the government, for example. Off-grid. I personally would love to live off-grid. I would personally love to live off-grid and have my own source of electricity, have my own filtration system, water system, everything like that, off-grid. Right now, I live on-grid. I live in a town, of course I live on-grid. I don't need to worry about the electricity, the water, or anything like that. It's easier to live on-grid than off-grid. But in this case here, this is very interesting because this hiker was out in the mountains, came across a campsite and found mummified bodies. Or found a mummified body. The police investigate and they find more. So the Gunnison County coroner, Michael Barnes, had since added to the description, providing details where the 3 or how the 3 may have gotten there, or when they may have gotten there, what their plans might have been, and what likely killed them. Coroner, C-O-R-O-N-E-R. Coroner is a person who investigates a death of a person who investigates how another person died. If there is a crime, they will call the coroner and they will investigate the bodies to try and figure out what exactly happened to this person. So that is coroner. So according to Barnes, the coroner, it appears as if these 3 had started a stint of camping in mid to late July of 2022. There's evidence that would suggest the campers had plans to live at the spot permanently, which meant they were going to stay there in winter. And let me tell you, Colorado has some harsh winters. Harsh winter, that is a lovely collocation and a beautiful adjective for winter. Easy winter, difficult winter, harsh winter. Harsh winter will be very cold, lots of snow, very dark, snowstorms, all that sort of stuff. With snowfall particularly heavy and low temperatures abundant during the start of 2023, it would have been incredibly difficult to survive there. Now, the coroner has not released the cause of death yet. However, it's suspected the 3 died from malnutrition or exposure at some point over winter. Exposure. Exposure is when you are exposed to the elements too much and your body dies. Your body shuts down and you are unable to survive. You could suffer from exposure if you're walking in a desert. You could suffer from exposure if you're on the beach all day for like days on days at a time. Imagine you were on a life raft in the ocean and you're just sitting there with the sun beating down on you. That will count as exposure. And in this case here, exposure in winter would have been absolutely terrible, low temperatures, snow, and harsh winds, I'm guessing. The police did say foul play is not expected to be a factor. Foul play. Foulplay. That's a very legal term, one that police might use, and it would suggest that something bad happened, something sinister happened. You know, maybe there was a murder, maybe people were fighting each other and that led to the deaths. But in this case here, foul play is not suspected. Foul play is not expected to be a factor. So they don't believe anything sinister happened, just a tragedy, essentially. So the newspaper goes on to say that condolences go out to those impacted, of course. Condolences. Condolences. That's a very interesting word and one that you should write down. And it's one that we use a lot when people pass away, people die, or something like really, really bad happens. If you go to a wake, if you go to a person's house after they die and you're talking to the family, we often say, my condolences. My condolences to you and your family. John was a lovely person. My condolences to you and your family. Mary was absolutely amazing. You could text a person saying condolences for blah, blah, blah. Condolences for your recent loss. We're thinking of you. So that's a very important word and probably something that's not in a lot of language textbooks. Let's be honest. They're not going to be talking about death or anything. But condolences for. My condolences is how we would generally use it. So if I go to a house and there's a widow or a widower, I would say my condolences. I'm very, very sorry for what you're going through right now. So this was a very interesting story I found. And, you know, this is a story that made me go, what the hell? Made me go, what the fuck? What the actual fuck? Because the headline of the story said 3 mummified bodies were found. A mummified body is a body that has been dried out. So obviously these people have been there for a very, very long time. They have completely dried out, and that is what happened to the Egyptian mummies. The Egyptian mummies were actually covered with natron, which is like a type of salt that dries out whatever it touches, and there would have been lots and lots of salt poured over them. And then of course the body will dry out, and that's what we have today with preserved bodies. And so these people were naturally mummified. Some other useful English that came up in the news story: an autopsy was performed. Autopsy. An autopsy is when the coroner will cut open a body and try to determine the cause of death. That is an autopsy. And, you know, if a person dies in hospital, there's generally an autopsy. If a person dies in suspicious circumstances, there's always going to be an autopsy. And the coroner, Barnes, suspects that the 3 died from malnutrition and our exposure during the winter. Malnutrition. Malnutrition is when you do not get enough nutrition in your body. And of course, if you're living off grid, if you're living up in the mountains in the winter, it's very easy to suffer malnutrition or to get malnutrition because you're unable to get the right food. You know, there's not going to be fresh vegetables, for example, no fresh fruit up there or anything. So it's a very different lifestyle. So overall, that is a story that made me go, what the fuck? I can only imagine what the hiker was going through when they first came across the one body, and then they went to get the cops. The cops found two more bodies, and it's like a small little community of people who supposedly try to live in the winter. It's a tragedy, of course. Absolute tragedy. It's very sad. This story made me say, what the fuck? What the hell? What the actual fuck? And some other things that you could say? What on earth? What on earth? Shut the front door. Shut the front door. You know, if you're really surprised about something, you can say, shut the front door. Which means, shut the fuck up. What in tarnation? What in tarnation? Not so common, but you need to understand what in tarnation means, and it just means that someone is surprised. And of course, another phrase for being surprised, holy cow. So like if I'm looking through the newspapers and I see a headline, something crazy, holy cow, I gotta read that story. So overall, folks, this random lesson of English is teaching you some strange words like my condolences, autopsy, coroner, and in different ways to say that you're surprised. Holy cow, what the fuck, what the actual fuck, what the hell, what on earth, what in tarnation, shut the front door. Folks, hope you have a great day. I'll talk to you soon. Thank you all for listening. As I said at the start of the podcast, my name is Ronan. This is the Little Seal English Podcast. Please check out my Instagram, check out my YouTube, and check out my Telegram channel. I'm also on TikTok, all the social media channels. I'm really looking forward to the next couple of months. I have a couple of different projects on the go right now, and one project is to give you a workbook for podcasts. Because, you know, you can listen to all the podcasts in the world. However, I have developed a method that will help you utilize a podcast, utilize a TV show, utilize absolutely anything to boost your English. So stay tuned for that because it's coming up very, very soon. Overall, I'm going to go have a coffee, relax for a bit, do some more reading, and possibly record another podcast. Who knows? Guys, just have a great weekend. Thanks a million for being here.